Welcome this morning. As you know, we have meditation here on the second Saturday of the month. We may be increasing the frequency of that in the future, but for now, that's how it is. And let's begin as usual by just settling in and bringing mind and body together. Amin Shakin Kipo Jane to Sumsaki Gunkin Wani. Don Sem Shugun Sunta Sepa, so animation class so what. Amin Shakin Kipo Jane to Sumsaki Gunkin no one and some Shugun Sunta Sepa. So animation class so again of chance something like Sarum Poline, such again at your name, Kiki Suda to get you get Jesus so good of my city. Okay, so we're going to begin with our bodhicitta motivation. First of all, bodhicitta being the wish to attain enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings, and the determination to do whatever is necessary towards that end. So that means that out of compassion for the suffering of others, we want to help them to remove the cause of suffering, which is fundamental ignorance, which can be removed by attaining enlightenment, in brief. So today we're going to discuss bringing sickness onto the path. Okay. I don't know what's going on here. Okay. So we have a tendency to separate our life from our practice and from our study, right? So we have kind of our life over here, our study over here, our practice over here, our life over here. And when we talk about bringing something onto the path, it means to apply the teaching to that particular thing and try to put those teachings into practice, okay? So that we're integrating, because otherwise we're not going to really get anywhere, right? It's not going to be useful for us in any way if we are keeping those things separate. We're not going to be able to progress. So there are, some basic Buddhist concepts or Buddhist teachings that we can apply to nearly every situation, okay? The first and most important are compassion and bodhicitta. So sometimes people use those terms interchangeably, but they're not really interchangeable, okay? Compassion, mere compassion is the type of compassion we're all familiar with, right? We see the suffering of someone else. We want to remove that suffering. We want them to be free of suffering. That's compassion. And bodhicitta starts there, but it doesn't end there. It's mixed with the wisdom that understands the cause of that suffering, okay? As I said just a few minutes ago. So ultimately, the cause of suffering is called marikpa, which means kind of lack of wisdom, okay? Ma is a negation, and Rigpa is kind of wisdom. It's a type of wisdom. So this fundamental ignorance is about the nature of reality itself and the nature of ourselves, the self, as of who we are. We're ignorant of that. And so that type of ignorance causes us to remain trapped in cyclic existence, this round of birth and death that we've been on since beginning this time. So unless we eradicate the cause, that sickness of samsara, if you want to put it in those terms, is just going to continue, right? So we have to address the cause. So bodhicitta is an attempt to address that cause, okay? So in the case of having an illness, how do we do this? How do we apply compassion and bodhicitta? Okay. Essentially by thinking of others. So we can make this a very specific thing, like may this knee pain take away the knee pain of all beings, right? Or we can make it more generalized. So may this knee pain remove the suffering of all beings, right? Oh, it's a message from Tuk Rinpoche for you. And he says, of course, I'll pray. So, pardon me. So, breaking news. So, um, um, that's great. Tuk Rinpoche is one of our main teachers. Tuk Palmo Rybicki, Jigmekins Rinpoche. Okay. Right. So we can make it very specific. This particular type of pain may take away the pain of others, or in general, as I said. So what does that do? We might feel like, what's the point of that, right? How is that going to help anything if I just say, may this help others, right? Well, one thing that it does is it connects us with others. When we're in pain, when we're sick, we have a tendency to kind of turn inwards, right? And we isolate ourselves. And in that self-isolation, it can actually intensify the suffering that we have due to our pain and illness, right? Because we feel, even if consciously we know that it's not true, there's a feeling that arises that I'm the only one who's suffering like this. It's that feeling of just like, I'm the only one, I'm alone in this pain, I'm alone in this suffering. As soon as we think about others, that goes away, that isolation goes away. So we realize, oh, I'm not the only one suffering. There's countless beings who are suffering all kinds of, in this case, we're talking about sickness, all kinds of illness, all kinds of other types of suffering, right? And when we talk about illness, we're not just talking about physical illness or physical pain, but also mental illness and mental pain, right? So many other beings are also suffering from these things, okay? So when we talk in those terms, we have to be careful that to be precise kind of in our understanding of this, okay? That we're not saying to think of the suffering of others as a way of invalidating our own suffering, right? We're not saying, oh, you have nothing to complain about, there's children starving in Ethiopia or whatever, right? We're not saying that. It's just that it's a way of having compassion, of having sympathy, empathy, right, for others. And it's like, we're in this together kind of feeling, right? Rather than saying, I have no right to feel bad about my situation because others are suffering worse. That is not the message, okay? So how does that help? That helps us in that way. Okay, then it gives some kind of meaning to our suffering, right? Which makes it like transformative rather than just this kind of burden that we have on our shoulders. I have to go through this, and like we often add to our suffering by the way that we relate to our suffering. Okay, by this kind of like, why is happening to me, and why does my life suck so much, right? Right. And I hate this, whatever, right? But we can take this painful thing that we see as negative and transform it into practice, into something positive, where we're using it as a way of developing compassion for others, right? And the more kind of compassion and wisdom that we put out into this world, the better off the world will be, really, you know. We need to understand the power that we have as an individual, as a practitioner, as someone who's on a spiritual path, right? We can feel quite small and powerless, but when we do this kind of practice, it's actually very powerful. And we have to understand that these sort of institutions that we think about, like companies or governments or states or countries or whatever, it's not separate from individuals, right? It's a lot of individuals who make up this particular thing, like trees make up a forest, right? So if individuals can change, can generate compassion, bodhicitta, love, patience, all these things, then the whole thing changes ultimately, right? So this gives a usefulness to being in pain or being ill in some way that that can help not only help us but help others as well. Okay. So another thing that a way that we can bring this kind of thing. Oh my gosh, I'm sorry. I thought your foot was a dog. I have dogs on the mind. She just moved her foot, and I was like, "Why is there a dog here?" Sorry. Perceptions, man. I'm telling you, it's just so funny. Um, so, uh, so another way that we can use our suffering, okay, is to develop renunciation for samsara. So again, samsara being cyclic existence. So what does that mean? You know, um, we have this mistaken view about, let's just say, life. Let's not even think of in these bigger terms of past and future lives and all that stuff. Okay, just our life. Okay, we have this really sort of a view that has no basis in reality, that our life should be easy, without problems. It should not change. And that, if I can just get all my ducks in a row, everything will be okay. And like, I'll never suffer again. We might not say that, consciously say that, but it is the thought process. If we pay attention, that is the thought process. Okay. And the problem with thinking this way is that it's not true. It's just not true, because that is not how cyclic existence works. And if we continue to beat our heads against the wall saying it should be like this, it should be like this, it should be like this, all we're doing is adding to our own, more suffering to our own life, So and let me finish that thought first before I go on to the next thing. So we're kind of like in love with this fantasy of how our life should be. Okay. And so we're it's like the opposite of renunciation for cyclic existence. And when I say renunciation, I don't mean like, we should all, give away all our possessions and go and live in a cave somewhere in the Himalayas. That's not the kind of renunciation I'm talking about. Okay. And in fact, Tugor Rinpoche says, I love him so much. He says that we're actually, when we talk about renunciation and the Vajrayana, we're talking about renouncing the cause of suffering, okay, which are our conflicting emotions, hatred, anger, pride, all this kind of stuff, okay, renouncing the cause of suffering. So as long as we cling to this fantasy of how we think life should be, we're going to be grasping, right? We're going to be grasping after material things. So that's material things like computers that don't work properly, and and cars and houses and whatever, but also material things like relationships and jobs and, you know, anything that's kind of outside of ourselves. If we're looking outside of ourselves to find the cause of happiness, we will never find it. Okay? And that's going to cause us to suffer. So we need to see, to actually like have the courage to face reality. Okay? You know, Pema Chodron, who probably most of you know, many of you know Pema Chodron. She's a really wonderful teacher. She's written a whole bunch of books. I recommend her. She said, maybe the first teaching that she ever went to, the Lama said something along the lines of, yeah, you're never going to get your act together. You're never going to get all your ducks in a row. She's like, what? You know, I didn't come here for this. I came here for like what everybody comes to Buddhism for, right? Oh, peace and love and being groovy, you know? And it's like, why are you telling me this bad news, you know? Right? But it's true. It's true. It's actually true. And the funny thing is that we have so much evidence for the truth and no evidence for our fantasy, but we cling on to that fantasy nonetheless, right? Somewhere along the line, we thought, you know, if I get into this relationship, it's gonna save me. It's gonna just save my life. You know, I'm gonna be happy all the time. And again, these aren't always things that we recognize consciously, but subconsciously it's there, you know. And we get in the relationship, and well, we're all old enough, you know, to have been through a few of those, right? Yeah, we won't go there. So, or as soon as I get this job, I'll be happy, or as soon as I move house, I'll be happy, or as soon as I whatever, I'll be happy. Okay. Has that ever happened? No, it has never effing happened. Not once. Okay. We're happy momentarily for sure. For sure. Thrilled, overjoyed, you know, blissed out even. But that never lasts, you know. And yet we keep thinking, and we don't ever examine that. Like, to me, it's just crazy, you know. We never examine that. Like, I thought this house was going to make me really happy, right? And it doesn't. And we never stop and go, well, why? You know, am I seeing things incorrectly? No. We just go, well, maybe this relationship will, you know, and we go running after a relationship and that doesn't work. And then we go, well, maybe I need to change jobs, you know, and we go, you know, whatever. Okay. Or maybe I just need a dog, you know, right? That's me. I just need a dog. Why can't I just get a dog, you know? Okay. And over and over and over and over our entire life, you know. So this basis, this type of ignorance about the nature of reality is why the Buddha, his very first teaching, first words out of his mouth after he attained enlightenment. Hello, everyone. There's suffering. Holy crap. You know, like, it seems so obvious. Like, of course there's suffering, Buddha. What are you, dumb? Like, of course there's, sorry, Lord Buddha. But, you know, we can think that's so obvious, right? Yes, I know there's suffering, you know. I went through adolescence. I had to go to school. I know there's suffering, you know. I'm a woman. I know there's suffering, you know, right? I've been sick. I've had loved ones die, you know. Of course there's suffering. That suffering we see, that suffering is obvious. This other kind of suffering that I just described is not obvious. And that's the problem. And that's why the Buddha taught those Four Noble Truths. There is suffering, dukkha, unsatisfactoriness, and that has a cause. And it can be fixed, good news, And here's how to fix that, the path. Those are the Four Noble Truths in the briefest form possible, right? So if we're going to deal with a problem, we have to know first what that problem is. Otherwise, it's just spitting into the wind. We have no idea, right? So we just face, okay, these things are, not really going to make me happy. This is how all of cyclic existence functions. This is the engine for that, looking in the wrong place. I can't ever say that without thinking of that song. Looking for love in all the wrong places, right? And it's the first time I ever let myself, share that with you. So you're very fortunate to know how this insane mind works. So renunciation is about that. It's about saying, I'm not gonna, this is like the trick of cyclic existence, and I'm not gonna keep falling for this BS, right? Falling for this con artist. And so I'm gonna reject that. I'm gonna look elsewhere. I'm gonna have the courage to look elsewhere. Okay. So being sick, having an illness, suffering in any way can really help us to connect with the reality of that, right? Because it forces us to get out of this kind of fantasy world where we think, oh, everything's okay, And most of the time, I mean, at least for people in our situation, like we're not having bombs dropped on our head, this kind of stuff, right? We can sort of find that equilibrium of some kind. And then as soon as we find that equilibrium where things are like more or less okay, then we kind of go to sleep, right? It just becomes sort of unconscious where it's like, okay, yes, okay, I have to, whatever. I have to get up, I had to make my coffee, got these doctor's appointments, got to go to work, right? And then we get home, we're going to watch whatever on TV or whatever it is we do. Okay. And then we get sick, really sick, seriously sick. Okay. Or someone we love dies, or we lose our job. Can you close that? Yeah, are you closing that door? Thanks. Those kind of things wake us up, right? And we're just like, oh, yeah, okay, right. And that's a very precious time, actually. Those moments of shock for us it's a really precious time because we can wake up during that time, and get out of this kind of zombified state, that we were in of, everything's okay. We don't just think everything's kind of more or less okay. We think it will always be. Now I've kind of tamped down all these fires, and now it's cool. I got it, and like, it's just going to keep going like that forever. But we don't know. We've like built our house on that town in Pennsylvania that's always on fire underground. This town.
Centralia.
Oh my goodness. What's it called?
Centralia.
Contralia?
Centralia.
Centralia?
Yeah.
What a weird
town.
Centralia.
My mother was born there. Oh, really?
Really? Oh my gosh. Yeah. So that's actually samsara, such a good explanation, metaphor for samsara. Like, we might think all those fires are gone, but underground is like, okay. So we, as practitioners, we can take those moments and really turn our mind's eye very strongly and purposefully on that, and be like, look at this, you know. It can be so helpful for the path in general. So now we're going a good, segue into illness as a reminder of impermanence and death, right? Like that's the other thing, this understanding. So Buddha taught that the contemplation of impermanence, he called the contemplation of impermanence the king of all practices, because it's so helpful in all these different ways, right? So when we think like, oh, yeah, this is impermanence, yesterday I wasn't sick, today I'm sick, you know, and this illness will change one way or another, right? Either we will be cured of that, or we will die from that, and so it too is impermanent in that sense, and it can wake us up to like, I am also impermanent, and there's so many situations in our life, big and small, that can point us in that direction. But we normally, the smaller things we kind of don't pay too much attention to. It's the bigger things. That's why I'm saying like those kind of things are like a gift, when you're flying Delta and your plane lands upside down. You're kind of like, oh, my plane doesn't land upside down. And yeah, thankfully those people were okay. But like, talk about a wake-up call, Okay. The other issue, and I think that, we have to, I'm not going to be able to discuss everything here, but so I'm gonna skip a couple of points. Yeah, I'm gonna skip that point. So it can really help us to get a glimpse of kind of the empty nature of reality. Okay, and it can help us to reach the point of non-attachment to the self as inherently existent. So in the retreat that we did last weekend, I was discussing that. So the typical terminology is attachment to the self. Self-attachment is kind of this terminology that's used, right? But it's really not a good translation of the notion of that, the fullness of that idea, okay? Because when we think about self-attachment or self-clinging, it's often put like that, we right away flip into sort of egotism, right? Like we think it's like me first, and that's an aspect of it, but that's not the full picture at all. It's attachment to the concept of an inherently existent self. That's attachment to what they mean, what they really mean when they say attachment to the self. Okay. So we have, related to what I said earlier, we have this idea of a permanent self. Yeah. And, and, which again it's kind of mind blowing how we don't get this idea, because we have been changing millisecond by millisecond since the second that we were conceived until this moment. And yet we still really hold on to this mistaken notion that we're permanent, that we don't change. We think the person we see in the mirror when we brush our teeth in the morning is the same person we see in the mirror when we brush our teeth in the evening, and that is not true. Okay. And we sort of go from day to day going, I am whatever. I am a man. I am a woman. I am non-binary, which you can also be attached to, right? I am, such and such an age. I have such and such a job, And all of these things, we sort of slap all these labels on ourselves and think that it's permanent. And then we see a photo of ourselves from 10 or 20 years ago, and we're like, that's very different, I'm sensing some change, right? Okay. So when we become ill, whether it's small or large, it's another opportunity to gain in this wisdom of how reality actually is, how the body actually is, right? And the insubstantial nature of our body, actually, yeah, and how we we see sort of who we once were or how we thought life should be just dissolve before our eyes. It's an incredible opportunity if we can take it. I remember when my dad was dying and I was a main caregiver, and it was so interesting to see kind of all the teachings just being laid out before me in this process of him dying, and this the kind of empty aspect of the self was very clear. Here's this person who was so powerful, who was always the center of attention, who command the space that he walked into, couldn't even stand up anymore. Couldn't just became very soft. And I was like, "Wow, you're so soft and nice now." Where were you the last 40 years of my life? So, right? Poor guy. So, and then no longer holding the job and the title that he had, and his body changing very rapidly from day to day in that process of death, and his personality changing in that time, and all these things. What are we going to point to say that's the I? This is me. This is who I am. That's who that person is, right? We can't. And so it's worthwhile, to use whatever opportunities we have to try to consciously examine these things, yeah, with our conscious mind while it still works, And I can tell you personally, I've seen a great decline in the last 5 to 10 years, What were you going to say? As an example. So as we get older and as we, when we're sick, especially if we're very sick, like last month I had really bad flu, and it's really hard to do anything in that state, I could barely get up to go to the bathroom, right? Much less do anything else. So we need to use our mind now when we can function, when we can think properly, when we have relative health and all of that, to practice, to examine these things, because that's what's going to help us down the road. Okay. So the body, when we say I, me, mine, all this, it's very dependent. Those, can I say, this person that was giving this teaching, I took some of these notes from, she says, the body is the primary basis for a fixed, solid identity, right? So when the body changes, it's a good opportunity to say, wait, well, who am I? Where's the I? What is actually happening here? Okay. So when we're very sick, okay, or when we're dying, pain can make meditation really difficult. Being sick can make meditation really difficult, practice really difficult. And it's at that time that we need to really have compassion towards ourselves. Yeah. Compassion towards ourselves and towards our situation. Please be careful of that. This is, I think, a common thing that Western practitioners do, is sort of use the teachings and beat themselves up with the teachings. Okay. Please don't do that. we do our best, and we let it go. You know, we're not always going to be able to apply the teachings. Even we're not always going to be able to meditate. We're not always going to be able to see things the way we quote unquote should see them. Okay, we're doing our best. We have this life, and we have future lives. You know, so whatever progress we manage to make in this life is not a waste. It will be carried into the next life. So we don't have to feel like I got to understand everything right now. I have to be the perfect practitioner right now. I got to no. I mean, we're not saying like just lay around and eat bonbons and watch your shows, as our grandmothers used to say, right? Of course, we want to make effort, but we don't want to have such high expectations of ourselves that we end up beating ourselves up. It's not helpful. Okay. Like in that situation too, like if we can't like muster the energy to, you know, do our practice, maybe we can listen to a teaching, you know, or listen to a guided meditation that will kind of help, or have a friend, you know, help us with that kind of thing. You know, it can be really, really useful. So yeah. And anything that we do in this realm, again, should be really mixed with bodhicitta. And, you know, Shantideva says in this text, Way of the Bodhisattva, this just a little quote here from that. As long as diseases afflict the living, as long as diseases afflict living beings, may I be the doctor, the medicine, and also the nurse who restores them to health. Okay. All right, so I'm going to end here. And we're going to actually do just a few minutes of mindfulness of breathing practice. And then we're going to do this analytical meditation on impermanence from this text. Okay, this is the text, How to Meditate by Kathleen McDonald. I met her in Nepal when I was very new to Buddhism. She was leading a retreat at Kopan, which I don't know if anybody knows Kopan, but it was one of the first, you know Kopan, yeah. Was one of the first places that was made to teach Buddhism to Westerners, and it was outside of Kathmandu. And poor Kathleen, I gave her such a hard time. Oh my God. I just was very curious, and I just didn't understand things. And I had this whole debate with her about energy, and it's all just energy. And she was like, I'm going to kill this woman. So anyway, okay, so let's just do some mindfulness breathing practice, get our minds kind of settled in. So we're all in chairs here. If you're sitting on the floor or in a, you know, on your bed or whatever at home, just cross your legs whatever way is comfortable. If you're sitting in a chair, you just want your feet flat on the floor in front of you. It'll support your posture better. All the other instructions are the same. So you want your hands can be either palms down on your knees, resting palms up like that in your lap, or with your fingers on top and your thumbs touching like that in your lap. Arms are relaxed, back is straight, back of the neck is also straight, chin's going to be tucked in a little bit. Mouth is closed but relaxed, tongue resting on the roof of the mouth. Breathing through the nose, the eyes are open, looking down a few feet in front of you. And just bring the awareness to the sensation of the breath. I'm going to use that as our focus, letting the thoughts come and go. Just going to do that for really just a couple minutes. I'm going to ring the gong to start that. Okay, now we're going to move into this analytical meditation. First, turn your awareness to your body. Think of its many different parts: arms, legs, head, skin, blood, bones, nerves, and muscles. Examine them one by one. Contemplate the nature of these things, their substance, texture, shape, and size. Be sensitive to the body at work, the movement that is occurring every moment, the ebb and flow of your breath, the beating of your heart, the flow of your blood, and the energy of your nerve impulses. Be aware of your body at the even more subtle level of its cellular structure, that it is entirely composed of living cells coming into existence, moving about, reproducing, dying, and disintegrating. On an even subtler level, all the parts of your body are made of molecules, atoms, and subatomic particles, and these are in constant motion. Try to really get a feeling for the change that is taking place every moment in your body. Now turn your attention to your mind. It too is composed of many parts: thoughts, perceptions, feelings, memories, and images following one after the other ceaselessly. Spend a moment simply observing the ever-changing flow of experiences in your mind, like someone looking out of a window onto a busy street, watching the cars and pedestrians passing by. Don't cling to anything that you see in your mind. Don't judge or make comments. Just observe and try to get a sense of the impermanent, ever-changing nature of your mind. Now extend your awareness to the outer world. Think of your immediate surroundings, the chair or cushion or bed you're sitting on, the floor, walls, windows, ceilings of the room, the furniture, and other objects, other people in the room. Consider that each of these, although appearing solid and static, is actually a mass of tiny particles whizzing around. Stay with that experience for a while. Then let your awareness travel further out, beyond the walls of the room. Think of other people. Their bodies and minds are also constantly changing, not staying the same for even one moment. The same is true of all living beings, like animals, birds, and insects. Now think of all the inanimate objects in the world: houses, buildings, cars, mountains, oceans, the earth itself, the sun, moon, and stars. All of these things, being composed of atoms and other minute particles, are constantly changing every moment, every millisecond. Nothing stays the same without changing. Concentrate on this experience. Conclude the meditation with the thought that it is unrealistic and self-defeating to cling to things as though they were permanent. Whatever is beautiful and pleasing will change and eventually disappear, so we can't expect it to give us lasting happiness. Also, whatever is unpleasant or disturbing won't last forever. It might even change for the better, so there's no need to be upset or to reject it. Dedicate your positive energy and insight to the happiness of all living beings. All right, so now we're going to say the closing prayers, which Eileen is going to pass around, and I will bring up on the screen for those. There is a link in the description below if you want to download it, but in case you haven't, I will just bring it up on the screen. I think I can do that. Oh no, I think I can't do that. Sorry about that. Anyway, it's in the description. You can click the link and it'll take you right there. I thought I could share here, but I'm not on Zoom, so. Oh, I can share the screen. Look at that. Oh my goodness. I hate technology. Okay, never mind. It's not letting me do it. I'm telling you, girl. All right. Well, it's blocking everything. Okay, we'll try to figure that out for the future. Meanwhile, let's just do these prayers. So pull it up again. Here we go. So long light prayers we do just once in Tibetan. And then I'll let you know what happens on the other pages. So, okay. So we go left column and then right column. Kanri wa we ko we shinkam su bendan de wa ma lu ju wen de Jenre si wan ten sing kim so ye shape ge ga ba chu cheng gyu shi Om swasti jigme kempe kalong yang paru kungab se chen se bum dawa nidra dun san nam ke no bu cho se che ga we shakin da su so Om swasti tse la gyam so chen la dun ju ne lun sin dak se gyu tru pama wang sang sun andre gyao po cha chen ne la chen ten de she chen da ge sho lama kung kam sam po so a de she du gu se ring wa so a de chi ne ta shin ge pa so a de lama dandre wa me pa chingi lo. So then on the next page, we read once in English, once in Tibetan. For the first prayer, the next three just in English, and then we do the 100-syllable mantra. By this merit, may all attain omniscience, may defeat the enemy, wrongdoing. From the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of cyclic existence, may I free all beings. Sonapti tamche sepani tomne nyepe dranam pamche shing kegana chi palon trupai sipe sole droa sho. May bodhicitta, precious and sublime, arise where it has not yet come to be, and where it has arisen, may it never fail, but grow and flourish ever more and more. As long as space endures, as long as sentient beings remain, until then may I too remain and dispel the miseries of the world. Ever absorbed in the display of divine forms and primordial awareness, appearance, sound, and perception in the state of divinities, mantras, and dharmakaya, may I, inseparable from the practice of the profound and secret great yoga, attain within the essence of mind the state of one taste. Om Vajra Sattva Samaya Manupalaya Vajra Sattva Tenopa Tishta Trito Me Bhava Sudokayo Me Bhava Supokayo Me Bhava Anurakto Me Bhava Sawa Siddhi Me Prayatsa Sawa Sutsam Me Chitam Shriyam Kuruhum Ha 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 ho Bhagavan Savatata Gata Vajramami Munsa Vajreba Mahasamaya Sattva. Okay, so thank you so much for joining us this morning. Before we go, I just want to make a couple of announcements. For those of you who do soak, the soak tomorrow at 12:30. We have meditation online every Saturday on YouTube live stream. I'm going to try to see if we can work out the kinks for Zoom, but right now we're just on the live stream. We also have some new classes coming up at the end of this month, beginning of next month. So if you are not signed up for the newsletter, please be sure to do that. Look in the description box for that. If you're not a member, we could really encourage you to become a member. We have lots of different levels according to need, and every level comes with some kind of discount. So check that out on membership on our website. If that's not your jam, that's okay. Then if you could make a donation through our GoFundMe or through our site, that would be great too. We have regular meetings 3 times a month to do the Buddha sadhana together. So again, everything's in the newsletter, everything's on our website. So please think about that. And I apologize for the technical difficulties we had this morning. It just seems to always be something when we come here. I don't know why. But anyway, we're doing our best. And so I'm going to say goodbye to the YouTube people, and then I'm going to ask you guys something. So, all right, bye. Have a good time. Have a good whatever weekend. There you go.